Ellen, I am so excited you're here today. There's such grace and grounding and warmth in everything you communicate. I followed you on social for a couple years. I picked up your book. Even when I invited you to come on the show, your energy came through the email, which doesn't happen. Every once in a while I'll get that from somebody, but like it transmits. And I'm just so excited that you're here today. I'm so grateful you said yes.
Ah, Michelle, what an opening to our conversation. It's an honor to be here. And isn't it all an energy transmission? All of it.
It is. And I love that you said that. But I think sometimes we forget. I think sometimes we're disconnected from that. And one of the reasons I loved your book and the way that you share is that you believe that our bodies want to heal. I share that belief and that there's messages all the time, but so often we don't want to sit with it because it's so deeply uncomfortable and it's just much easier to try to find a fix. Would you say yes to that?
That's exactly right, especially because some of those pathways for how our bodies heal, that can be confronting because it's not just take a nap and everything heals. Sometimes it's addressing unconscious content. Sometimes it's really reframing our understanding of how we get out of balance.
Absolutely. And it's interesting because you are a holistic psychiatrist.
That's
For
right.
anyone in my audience who's like, what is that? Can you define what it is? And also take it one step further because I understood from reading your book that you had your own mental and physical challenges, and it seemed to steer you in a different direction, which again, a lot of people may not have chosen to go that way. So I'd love to hear more of your story on that.
Yeah, so my background is very conventional. I went through medical school and psychiatry residency. And throughout those years, that's about a decade of my life, I was pretty out of balance. And that showed up as many physical ailments like I had polycystic ovary syndrome and ocular migraines and the beginning of various autoimmune conditions. And my joints hurt. And I had some mental health issues. I certainly couldn't focus, had very low mood. And my journey of learning in parallel, how do I help my patients, and feeling a bit disenchanted with what I was being taught. And at the same time, going down so many dead ends about how do I take care of myself
Mm.
and learning inefficiently the hard way, what actually brought me to a place of relief where I was finally thriving. That happening in parallel couldn't help but shift and shape the way I practice medicine. And so, holistic, the way I define it, is just that I'm taking the full portrait of my patients' lives into consideration mind, body, spirit. I'm certainly quite focused on the physical body. I think that's an underappreciated factor in mental health. I like to say mental health is physical health, and this is always where I start is if someone is inflamed or nutrient deficient or their gut is unwell or they're chronically sleep deprived, they're not going to have good mental health. It's almost not possible. So we start
Mm.
there, we get the physical body in balance, and then that clears the air and allows us to really explore the psycho-spiritual dimensions of mental health. And that's where it really gets spicy.
Absolutely. And I'm curious, is it considered cutting edge or is it looked at as like not the standard? I'm just, where are we in terms of mental health and the way you're approaching it?
Yeah, it definitely depends on who you ask.
That's what I
And
thought.
so
Okay. Yes. Yes.
there's demand for this. I think a lot of people are feeling demoralized and disenchanted with what they're getting from the field of psychiatry.
Yes.
But if you ask my colleagues, I think that this is seen as soft science, as woo-woo, as it's not considered the standard of care or rigorous evidence-based medicine. So I've had to really get comfortable not needing from an egoic place to keep up that reputation. That was important to me for a long time, was to be seen as credible, to be a part of the rigorous evidence-based gang of medical practitioners. And I've really had to step outside of it in order to practice in alignment with what feels true.
Wow. That takes a lot of courage. And I imagine it was also from being in practice and doing the sort of what the standard of care is, what it looks like today, and then starting to experiment with what you're talking about. Is that a fair
That's
thing to,
right.
yeah.
Through residency, I was practicing the standard of care. You don't really have a choice in that setting. And I was seeing the limitations of it, but even more concerning, I was seeing when it ran counter to that oath that we take of first do no harm. I thought some of the interventions actually carried risk of harm. And so it didn't sit right with me to put everyone on ever higher and more complicated regimens of medication. And I felt like we were overlooking all of these other more effective and safer ways to support someone's well being.
Yes. And from reading your book, it's not that you don't support medication. It's just that you don't see it as the only path to healing. Is that
That's
correct?
right. That's exactly right. I prescribe medication. A handful of my patients are on medications. It's just that it's one thing on the menu, not the whole menu.
Right. Right. Which is what is currently being offered that in just like talk therapy.
Yeah, currently the menu is different
Yes.
modalities of psychotherapy and medication.
Medication.
And that menu feels too limited. I always liken this to healing as a mountain that we're trying to get to the summit. At the summit, that's where you feel well, where your health can fade away into the background. It's just the foundation for you to carry out your version of a fulfilling life.
Mm.
But we currently say, here's the path up that mountain. It's therapy and it's medication. And that path gets some people all the way to the top of the mountain. That's a success. That's a
Yes.
victory. And some folks go up that path and then hit a dead end, and it gets them only so far. And so it's really those people that I want to connect to. It's those folks who are feeling disenchanted. They might be feeling despair. They might be feeling hopeless. They feel like they've tried every version of this menu of offerings and they haven't gotten any farther up the mountain. And so that's where I want to say, well, hold on, there are many paths up this mountain. That path took you only so far. Now we pivot, we change to a different path. Maybe we haven't been looking at inflammation, gut health, unresolved trauma. Maybe there's another path that we need to pivot to, take that for a little while. And sometimes you switch paths a couple times, but I do hold out the belief that everyone can make it to the top of this mountain.
Oh, that's so beautiful. And I love that you talked about achieving a fulfilling life because that's really at the heart of the show, too, an invitation to have women really live full on. Because as women and as caregivers, we deplete ourselves so readily and givingly and without stopping. Like we don't know how. We're just like going, going, going. And it's, it, my hope, and one of the reasons I started this podcast was I don't want any woman looking back at the end of her life going, oh gosh, I had my shot and I lived it for everyone else. And I'm so glad what I was able to contribute, except I didn't give to me. Like that's at the heart of this.
Yeah.
Is like, how do we get women back to also honor like their voices, their bodies, their needs, and all of that?
And I think, I mean, giving women credit, we're very capable. And so we hyper function, and it's sort of in this codependent relationship with people around us under functioning. And so we think, oh, if I don't do it, no one's going to do it right. And there's truth to that. And
Yes, we
sometimes
do.
when we don't do it, sometimes it just ends up making more work for us in the end anyway.
Yes.
And so I really like
Yes.
to give us grace for, we came by this honestly, but to me, the even bigger influence is that there's so much conditioning that we take in invisibly throughout our lives that says your worth, the way we prevent ourselves from, the worst case scenario in our unconscious is being cast out from the tribe, which feels like life or death. Your worth, your value to the tribe, the way we like you is when you are selfless, is when you are in service of everyone else. It's certainly not when you have needs or you recognize your worthiness of getting your needs met. That it feels risky. And I mean, I write about this in my second book. I was at a wedding, it's about maybe a year and a half ago, and every single toast to the bride was basically said something to the effect of, she puts everybody else's needs in front of her own. And we all nod warmly. And I love this woman, the bride.
Yes.
And yet I just couldn't help but see this is the memo that we're
Yeah.
saying is what we value in women is that you live for everyone else and not for yourself.
Yeah. She was literally getting praised and toasted for it, raising a glass. And so, how are you supposed to deviate from that when that's where you're maybe the only place you're getting any sort of acknowledgement for your contribution,
Yes.
right?
That's right. And we're smart. We make the calculation. We say it's actually in certain ways a better decision for me to sacrifice my well-being and live in service of everyone else, but be beloved and stay as a valuable member of the tribe. And I'm not saying women should suddenly swing the pendulum all the way to the other side. The way we are attuned to the needs of the group, the way we care and give is beautiful. We do need more of that in the world. There just needs to be a balance that we strike where we are giving when we are able to give joyfully, when we are pouring from a full cup, and then the minute we notice that we are nearing our energetic limit,
Yes.
we catch it and we feel worthy of calling it and saying, actually, I need to rest. Or actually, I would love to help you move, but I don't have the bandwidth at the
Mm.
moment, and to feel worthy of those boundaries.
I love that, giving joyfully. We're not thinking in those terms. We're just giving without checking in. That's so, so important. In terms of anxiety, I know you don't like labels and everything. I would love a definition. In the book, you wrote that an estimated 1 out of every 9 or 800 million people suffer from mental health, a mental health disorder, with the most common being anxiety. And the US is one of the most anxious countries. And obviously, the pandemic didn't help that. And our
Yeah.
children in that at all. So, how do you define and how do you view anxiety?
Yeah. So uh, I do struggle with defining it. And that's my honest truth. As much as I've written a book and read every definition, nothing feels perfect. But yes, some 40 million Americans are anxious in any given year. And that's a somewhat out of date statistic. We did see a precipitous rise over the course of the pandemic. And especially hard hit these days are adolescents, especially adolescent girls. And what we're up against. My field and our diagnostic statistical manual has a way of defining anxiety, but I almost bristle at the gatekeeping of it because it ends up where some people are wondering, do I have real anxiety, clinical anxiety, or am I, quote, just a little stressed?
Mm,
And to me, that difference is not meaningful. We need those distinctions when it comes to clinical trials where we have to define anxiety. And we
yes.
need those distinctions in order to gatekeep interventions that come with harm, that come with risk. So if we're going to put someone on medication, we don't want to do that willy-nilly. Where I think we don't need that distinction is, let's say you are someone who is subjectively suffering. You are feeling off, and the word you want to use to describe that feeling is anxious. So, in my opinion, if you are subjectively identifying with that word, come on over, let's talk, because I don't really think we need to make a hierarchy of suffering. We don't need to say this person who's very anxious is worthy of feeling better, but this person who's just a little stressed, we don't need to worry about them. I think it's all suffering.
Mm,
This can, I think, over time lead to this. And so let's start early and let's address it all. So to me, anyone who's identifying with that feeling subjectively, that feeling of, whether it's a chronic, pervasive feeling of a pit in their stomach, always feeling on edge, a feeling of a stress response at all times, or someone who is calm at baseline but has a panic attack once in a while, or someone who has social anxiety and they're okay unless they have to do public speaking or go to a happy hour or a networking event. There's all these different flavors of anxiety, but to me, it's all a reason to show up and say, let's roll up our sleeves, let's understand what's at the root of your anxiety, and let's take steps to mitigate it.
There's so much I want to unpack with you, and my mind is going as you're talking. So, so you talk about false anxiety and true anxiety, but so basically, what you were talking about there sort of encompasses that. Is that true? And then would you start with somebody with the body then? Because I know people are always looking for like, where do I begin? Like, yes, I have the social anxiety. I have the occasional panic attacks, whatever, they're relating to based on what you're saying, or I feel that pit every day I have to go into work or whatever. The stakes are too high, whatever it might
Yeah.
be.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So in a way, which manifestation of anxiety someone has is only really a clue. It's not an answer. It's, as I say in my book, like anxiety, the diagnosis, that's not the end that's not the final verdict. That's the beginning of the inquiry. So if
Okay.
someone has social anxiety or panic disorder with agoraphobia, like none of that tells me, okay, I know exactly what our path out is going to be. That's the
Yes.
very beginning of the inquiry. It's a clue, but it's not the whole story. And that binary of do you have clinical anxiety or not, I've discarded that binary in my work. And the binary that feels more useful and that, quote, this is a very medical way of speaking, but what changes management, what actually changes what we're going to do,
Yeah.
is that false anxiety, true anxiety binary. So I'll define it,
Please.
but basically false anxiety, which if that term doesn't sit right, if that feels triggering, it's not at all to invalidate the very real suffering. The false anxiety is just avoidable anxiety. It's
Yeah.
anxiety that's based in the physical body and it doesn't have to be happening. And when it comes to false anxiety, it's usually that something has tripped the body into a stress response. Could be a blood sugar crash, bad night of sleep, could be a hangover. And then our body in that stress response, we subjectively experience it as what we would call anxiety. And then our mind comes in and tells us a story to make sense of why we're feeling anxiety.
Totally.
And our mind, it's the consummate meaning maker. It is a storyteller. This is what it is to be human. It's great.
Yes.
But
Yes.
that story, which always has a kernel of truth, is not the real reason for our anxiety in that moment. So we're in a blood sugar crash. Now we're in a state that we'll call anxiety. Our mind says, I know why I'm anxious. I'm anxious because of work. Work is stressful, but we're actually anxious because of the blood sugar crash. And if we hadn't had a blood sugar crash, we wouldn't have a story going in our mind about work. We would just feel okay. So with false anxiety, I want to identify what's tripping our body into all these stress responses. Can we address it at the root and eliminate all of this unnecessary suffering? That's false anxiety.
Okay.
That one to me is the most revolutionary because when I work with patients, when I look around, I realize there is untold amounts of unnecessary suffering happening. We don't think to look at the physical body, and we can actually do away with a large percentage of suffering that's happening.
Yeah.
I'm not saying it's easy to do though.
No, of course. And that's part of the invitation, though, isn't it? I mean, we said you write that our bodies want to heal. So that requires inquiry, like you said, and trying some stuff,
Yeah, that's
right?
right. And
Yeah.
it can
And
be
paying
done.
attention. And it can be done, which
Can
is
be
the
done.
hopeful part, which is the hopeful part.
I'm
Uh,
so hopeful. I think, I mean, especially because I've gone from really suffering to really not. And so I come by hope very honestly. I viscerally feel, I know that one can get to the other side of these conditions.
mm,
That said, true anxiety, it's very different. This is purposeful anxiety. It's not something that we get to fix. It's not something to suppress. We couldn't, even if we wanted to.
yeah.
This is our inner compass. It's nudging us. It's telling us, slow down, pay attention. Something's out of alignment. And it can pertain to our personal lives, our communities, the world at large. There's a call to action. It's asking us to show up and mobilize and letting that uneasy feeling fuel purposeful action.
Mm,
I think true anxiety also encompasses what I think of as the inherent fragility of walking this earth as a human being, the fact that this is all impermanent, that there is loss, that there is suffering.
yeah.
And I think our culture is a little inadequate at giving us tools for navigating this and frameworks for understanding it. We tend to be very squeamish and avoidant about these questions, but I don't
Yes.
think that's helping us. So we want to actually grapple with it. We want to
Yeah.
say, okay, if this is all impermanent, what is the end? Is the end absolute? Is my hypervigilance and trying to white knuckle my life, is that protecting me, or is that actually blocking me from getting to enjoy this fleeting dream? And I think that we just want to, I think, usually arrive at some place where we can feel comfortable in a surrendered, trusting stance to the fact that we do not control the outcome here. And that's like anxiety catnip, right? Is like we want to control the outcome, we
100%.
want certainty, but we don't ever have it. And I think the sooner we disabuse ourselves of any delusion that we do have it, I actually think we get to relief and comfort sooner.
Okay. So can we break this down? Obviously, this is not about quick fixes. This is a conversation. But if you could offer, so let's talk about the false anxieties. Some
Mm.
things to look at. I know sleep was one of the ones. And I'm curious, do you wake up feeling rested?
At this point in my life, I do, but that's after some 43 years of not getting it right.
Okay, because I think about this because I sleep, but I dream like crazy. And I wake up exhausted sometimes. I'm like, I'll wake, and I like when I can wake up without an alarm, but now that it's back to school time, that's not happening. I need the alarm.
Yeah.
But I might be in the middle of a dream and I wake up and I'm a high, you can maybe tell I'm sort of high energy. I'm good throughout the day. It's not like I'm dragging. I don't even need coffee. I'm not that person, but I want to know what it feels like to wake up feeling rested.
I mean, those vivid dreams. First of all, it may be that you're getting interrupted in your sleep cycle. Vivid is sometimes our experience of a dream that we remembered, and we remembered it because it was interrupted.
Oh,
Sometimes.
interesting. Maybe like the alarm's going off, and that's why I'm like, oh, what was that weird dream I was just having? That's interesting. Okay, that makes sense.
Because sometimes we're having all the vivid dreams, but we have no memory of them because our
I
brain kind of
see.
properly lands that plane. We're
Yes,
back on the ground by the time we wake up. So it's
that's
too faint.
interesting.
We can't access it.
Yep.
But I think also, I mean, just to go a little bit down the witchier woo woo path, I think, I mean, what is our dreams? That's to me a whole other life that we're living. And, Freud and psychiatry would say this is our brain consolidating memories and organizing and putting things into place, maybe, and neurologically, sure. But perhaps on a psychospiritual level, there's more to this. And I think that in times like we're living through, where it feels like there is some large shift taking place, I think we're working overtime in our dream life. And it
Yes.
wouldn't be surprising if you are, you know, playing a pretty active role in that ecosystem in the liminal realm.
Interesting. And highly sensitive person, very much an empath. So maybe that's my body's way of processing whatever I'm taking in.
Or even actively participating in
Interesting.
whatever is occurring here. That's one of many frameworks. But I think if I were to take that false before true algorithmic approach, I
Yeah.
would think about the fact that you're probably getting interrupted from sleep before your body has completed that sleep cycle.
Hmm.
And that's where the solution is so unfun, which is getting in bed earlier.
Or not having my husband come to bed later, or having
Ugh.
my dog, bark or like get excited when he's coming to bed.
And this. Yeah. The disparate bedtimes between men and women is a huge pain point. And I don't see an easy solution other than what we sometimes call a bed divorce, like to prevent a real divorce.
Go to another room.
But men and women need different amounts of sleep. This
Yeah.
becomes increasingly true as women enter the perimenopausal and postmenopausal years. Our sleep is more fragile and we need more. And the fact that I am finally disciplined about it, finally entering the bedroom early enough, crawling into bed early enough, setting up all of the things in place to promote good sleep. And then just as I've fallen asleep, my husband comes barreling into the room and waking me up is cruel and
Yes.
in certain ways untenable.
Yes, because I've had that too. Because then sometimes you can't go back. It depends how soon I've been woken up. If it's
Yeah,
a couple hours in, I may be able to, I'm fine. But if it's like 5 minutes after I've dropped into the sleep and then I'm up, does
yeah.
that happen to you?
Yes, exactly that.
Yeah,
And
yeah.
and
I hate
and
that.
it's outrageous. And we're not
Yes.
culturally at a point where we see this as like this is an unacceptable hit to women's well-being. I think it is. And so what do
Yeah.
we do about it?
What do we
It,
do?
I have sympathy for the husbands who don't need as much sleep. So why would he come to bed at 10 p.m.? That's fair. But I don't know. I live in New York City. A second bedroom is not an option. So we don't have a perfect solution.
And when you have little kids too, I mean, we go through years. Maybe that's why you said it took, well, how old? I don't know. You said 43
Yeah,
years to
that's right.
yeah, because with the little ones, I mean, and that's to me, that's the right time to like not to be interrupted in it. It's okay
That's right.
because that we have to support that. But with our husbands, maybe there should be more of a
Maybe.
discussion. Yeah.
But I think that first we start with a cultural appreciation of the fact that interrupting a perimenopausal woman's sleep in the early minutes when she's just fallen asleep is cruel. But I also think that for me, I can't even completely blame my husband. I was not getting in bed early enough for
Okay.
so long, and it it's sort of the same way that a person who's always late to things, if you finally learn how to be a person who's on time to things, it usually comes through no longer having that temporal optimism of ADHD where you think, oh, I have 5 minutes until I'm supposed to leave. Okay, I can
Do
unload the
five more
dishwasher,
emails. Yeah,
write a
yeah.
chapter of my book, do
Yeah,
five more
yeah.
emails, take a shower, and blow dry my hair.
Yeah, yeah.
So, and so there's that, but I think it's actually planning for being wildly early. It's rather than, and if I do everything right and the train comes on time, then I will get there right at exactly the right moment. No, it's building in that 10 or 15-minute buffer. For
Okay.
me, I was getting into the bedroom and then getting into the bed and then talking for a few minutes and reading for a few minutes. And all of that meant I wasn't really getting to sleep until realistically 11:15, 11:30. And that was not giving me enough hours in the bed to get enough sleep by the time I was going to be woken up. So now I actually crawl into bed around 9:30 or 10, and
Okay.
I'm falling asleep early enough that when I wake up now, I feel rested. And that's been revolutionary.
Okay. And so you're not doing books. I know you're not doing screen time,
No, yeah. Well, I am
right?
reading books. Yeah,
You are. So the
I am
books you
reading.
keep, no screen time.
That's right.
And are you reading things that relax you? Because from what I do, I read so much nonfiction. I love fiction, but if I love a book, I will pull an all-nighter to finish that
Yeah.
book. So for me, fiction is actually, it's probably better if I stick to the nonfiction at night.
Yeah.
I'm curious
Yeah.
what you do. Yeah.
Well, it is ideal to read something that's a little life affirming and not so good that you're addicted to it. That said, I'm currently reading Circe by Madeline Miller, which is like the best book I've ever read. And I am pulling an all-nighter here and there because it's that good. But I get sleepy and I've learned to really honor,
Yeah.
like I think of sleepiness, like when you're yawning and your body is saying, it would feel pretty good to fall asleep right now. I think of that as a window of opportunity. And I used to play that fast and loose and think, okay, if I'm sleepy now, I'll be sleepier 20 minutes from now. But I've come to appreciate that's actually a window, it's a sweet spot. You want to catch that wave. If you're sleepy, that's the moment to put the book aside and fall asleep.
Okay. Okay. Anything else you do for sleep or recommend?
I do everything.
Okay, let's tell my audience. I want to, and do you not wake up to an alarm or do you?
I don't at this point.
Nice.
But so, yeah, so I basically, um, my bedtime routine probably starts first thing in the morning. I think that you want actual sunshine to get into your actual eyeballs as early in the day as is realistic for you, because that sets a moment in time. It marks that for your brain and says, this is the morning. There's neurohormonal consequences of that. It makes us feel awake and alert during the day, but it also ticks in the background. It programs the brain to get tired at bedtime. So morning sun is critical. And then after the sun sets, that's when my evening routine really takes more shape. I dim the lights around my home. There's no like full blast LED lights. Like to me, that's a very noxious stimuli for melatonin release. So much of what I do is really just trying to promote good melatonin release in the evening, that hormone that responds to darkness that makes us feel sleepy. And so I'm dimming the lights. I'm wearing blue blocking glasses, which I'll model. I wear
You have them
these
ready?
toward the
Yes.
end of the night,
Love
and
it.
this blocks blue spectrum light, so you protect the ability to secrete melatonin. And then I'm avoiding screens and upsetting content and fear-based algorithms closer to bedtime. I usually take magnesium glycinate and make sure that my bedroom's pretty cold. And I would say that sums up my bedtime routine.
Love it. Yeah. It's interesting. My gynecologist told me that 25% of her patients have almost like psychedelic kind of dreams on progesterone.
There's no free lunch when it comes to interventions. And this is a larger reflection on menopause, where menopause I consider to be a medical anomaly. Everything else that goes wrong in the human body, I take this ancestral lens and I say, okay, generally the human body is a good design. Maybe not the knee joint, but generally. And so if something's wrong, there's some way that we're getting the inputs not quite right for the body. Let's give the body what it needs. Let's get out of the way, and then the body will heal itself. And so
Yes.
that's the approach I take to so much else going on with physical health.
Okay.
Menopause is different
Okay.
because it is by definition post reproductive. So it's a little bit exempt from natural selection. If you think about over the course of human evolution, if one lucky woman had a gene mutation that created a better menopause, she didn't have hot flashes, she slept through the night, she didn't lose bone density, there's nothing to select for that because she's not going to reproduce more successfully because of those mutations. So those advantages die with her. And we
Mm.
haven't been able to hone the human genome toward a better menopause. So we can't use those same principles of if menopause is a struggle, let's just give the body the right inputs and it will take care of itself. It doesn't take care of itself. And a lot of the ways that we get out of balance in menopause actually echo what is an adaptive strategy in the postpartum period. That's the closest approximation that the body has to why did our hormones just precipitously crash? They
Yeah.
crash slowly, more slowly in menopause, but precipitously in the postpartum. But it's the best approximation. So then our body responds in a way that would make sense in the postpartum period. Mobilize calcium from the bones to create breast milk, radiate heat to warm our infant, have really superficial, easily interrupted sleep because we're going to be interrupted and
To
waking up
nurse.
for our newborn.
Yeah.
So all of it makes sense, but it's miserable in midlife. And I find
Interesting.
that's where it's different, is that we do need to give ourselves supports, and those supports come with side effects, and it's a little bit of a,
Trade-off. I didn't
it's
mean
the
to
cost of
fit.
doing business.
Yeah, it's a little bit of a trade-off. I didn't mean to interrupt. Okay, caffeine. Talk to us about caffeine.
So you're a non-coffee drinker, which
I
is
I have
a
my tea
beautiful thing.
here, but here's the thing, only because coffee makes me so jittery. And I could only have a sip. If I had more than a sip, I used to trigger a cold sore. So I just avoided it.
Your body says no.
It says no, but now it says yes. So I
Interesting.
can drink it every once in a while and I enjoy it, but I don't need it. And I know that sometimes it messes with me. So I'm sensitive to the caffeine and coffee, but not tea.
Yeah.
Lots of tea.
It is interesting how our body changes also in terms of what it tolerates. So, caffeine, I've changed my tune a little bit about caffeine over the years. I used to really shout loudly that if you're suffering from anxiety, remove anxiogenic substances. And I used to have patients that would come to me and say, I'm so anxious. How do I stop being anxious? And I would see them like chugging their super extra venti coffee. And I'd be like, that? Like, we're a dog
Yeah.
chasing our tail.
Yeah.
But I've softened around it a little bit because I think that there is a happy medium with caffeine and there are benefits to it. And so if someone is consuming a lot of caffeine and they're sensitive to it, it's certainly contributing to their anxiety. If
Yeah.
someone's consuming caffeine later in the day, it's very likely to be negatively impacting sleep, and that in turn contributes to our anxiety. So I want earlier in the day and less overall, but if someone gets a lot of joy from their cup of coffee, take that joy. And also, there's benefits. It's a source of magnesium, it's a source of antioxidants, perhaps it's beneficial to the liver. So I've softened around it. I am myself at this point a coffee drinker, but I use literally 1/4 of an amount of the caffeine that would be in a cup of coffee. I use three
Yes.
quarters decaf, 1/4 calf, and then that's the right amount for me. And even that, as you can see, I talk pretty fast. Even that I think does amp me up a bit.
Interesting. I do want to ask you because I have you on here. I'm a mom, you're a mom. Our kids, the expectations that are on them now, it's really different. Give us some advice about how to help our children navigate anxiety.
It's bad, and I don't feel like I think it will require sweeping cultural changes. I look to Jonathan Haidt. I look to Dr. Becky Kennedy. I think
Yes.
that we need to we actually need to say, oops, we messed up around
Totally.
the presence of screens in their lives, and we have to roll it back, which is as hard as we all immediately sense that that would be, because our kids, we have created addicts to screens, to this source of easy dopamine. And so,
Yes.
I have a 9-year old. Taking her off of her iPad, I brace for the fact that I am taking a drug away from a junkie. And that's with pretty strict limits around how much the iPad is part of her life. And so it is really tough. And if it's interesting to me that if you ask kids, would you like us to take your phone away? They say no. Like, this is how I stay connected. This is how I stay relevant. And this is critical for social belonging. And it's also their source of distraction and fun.
Yes.
But if you say, what if we took everyone's phones away? They would like that. And so they recognize that it's deteriorating their quality of life, but you can't be the one who's left behind. So I think it's the screens. It's a lot of things. I think that our kids are also malnourished. They're overfed but undernourished. They're
Yes.
inflamed.
Yes.
Their immune
Interesting.
systems are jacked up in all kinds of ways. I think there's a lot that we're doing that's destructive to mental and physical well-being. Where I feel like I have an intermediate ability to have an impact is at least in protecting my daughter's sleep and protecting darkness at night. I think that that's a fairly realistic strategy at first, because even if we can't roll it back and say no screens, no internet, no social media, at least no phone in the bedroom, and really no sources of blue spectrum light close to bedtime, because we need them sleeping. That's where their brains are developing. That's where they're staying well. That's where their immune systems are doing their work. That's the basis for good mental health. And they can't be sleeping well if there's a screen in the bedroom. So darkness in their bedroom, no screen in the bedroom, set them up for good sleep at the very least. And then I think we need huge cultural sweeping changes. That college pressure is about to get even, we're sort of throwing a new complication into that with AI, and with the fact that we are of a generation where we put years into honing a craft in service of a career, and now that is all being called into question. So we're in an interesting time, but I think as much as we can just do wherever we can to minimize screens and protect sleep, I think is a start for kids.
Yeah. And I think it's easier when they're younger because I'm like, you need your sleep. I just that always ingrained. But then once they're, it's junior, senior, they're staying up late and I'm like, but you need your sleep. And it's like, it's such a hard dance with them.
Yes.
And then they don't want to hear it from us anymore.
Yep. And their bedtime gets later as our bedtime gets earlier. And so I'm not even
Totally.
there to enforce it.
Yeah,
Yeah,
at some point you just like, oh, I'm too tired. I can't actually like I'm gonna have to trust this to a higher power. Which speaking
that's
of
right.
which, let's talk about when I asked I always ask my guests on the intake, like what are some topics you like to talk about? You wrote down magic. Let's talk
Yeah.
about magic, Ellen. I like the topic of magic, but how do
Yeah.
you see what does that mean to you?
So my first book was about anxiety, and I'm now deep in the writing process for my second book, which is about magic, and it's called The Season of the Witch. And even though I'm maybe 3 months out from handing in a final draft, I still don't have a great way of summarizing the book, but more or less it's told through the lens of grief. I'm talking about the experience of losing my parents, and
Hmm.
how through grief it really cracked open for me my worldview, my own version of spirituality. And then I realized, because women, so capable, hyper functioning, we understand the assignment. And I understood that the assignment was be rational, be evidence based, be yang in the yin yang balance sense. All of these very more phenotypically masculine qualities, our world tells us that's what's valuable. That's what you should aspire to. And I took that memo and I ran with it. And it opened doors for me. It got me places. I don't fully regret it, but I at least came to appreciate I had disavowed critical pieces of myself in the process. And and so this is really about a reclamation of our witchiness, of our intuition, of our, even call it irrationality of the woo woo. And I kind of want to re embrace that without apology. I just want to permission other women to at least explore those questions. Wherever they end up, I just want people to recognize if, in fact, they have also unconsciously made an assessment, molded their strengths and interests and personality traits around this cultural pressure to be rational, to be objective, to be young. And so it's an exploration of all those things, a little bit memoir, a little bit
Oh, I
functional
can't wait.
medicine. Yeah.
I
So
can't
Maverick,
wait. Congrats. That's exciting. And also, yes, intuition, our knowing and mother's intuition. I've seen it play out with CEOs when I worked in corporate. I worked directly for the CEOs, hired by them, self-made multimillionaires. They all used their gut, which
that's
was
right.
socially acceptable, but they didn't talk about it. But when a woman, a mom goes in and says to the doctor, there's something not right here, either with themselves or their child, it's all in your head. You're anxious. You're too stressed. Like they were discounted. Our knowing is discounted. And so I think it's courageous again, where I'm using that word with you, to put it out there because you're right. It will give other women permission because you're starting a conversation. And so somebody who's resonating with that now has a space to discuss it, whether within context of hearing you speak on a podcast or reading the book and then being able to go out and say, I've had that. I've had enough experiences that you can't explain. And I'm so grateful I have because I'm like, yeah, maybe it seems woo-woo, but it's my truth. You, it's happened. So I believe in the magic. I believe in more, and I believe in the sense of purpose and that direction. And you wrote in your book something which I really love that I want to read. It was in regard to purpose. You said that think of true anxiety as an invisible electric fence zapping you back on course every time you wander from your intended path. And when you're back on your path, that anxiety will transmute into a feeling of purpose. All we ever really need to hope for, in fact, is to be on our path. It means that we get to be ourselves, do what lights us up, and make a contribution that we are perfectly suited to make. It makes me emotional because this is the invitation, but it's hard when we don't like to sit. So before we wrap up today, can we talk about path and purpose? I got off of social media every summer. I do like a 2 week detox. I've been off it 2 months. I don't want to go back. I'm such a deeply curious person that I found like it was not make. I always felt worse coming off. So you said kids are addicted. That stupid phone was always in my hand on Instagram, and I'm like, oh, look at that cute dog. I have a cute dog. I don't have to see someone else's cute dog. You know what I mean? I love seeing your post because like I'd open it up and you'd say something meaningful or resonant, and like I think there's value in that. I'm not discounting the value that comes from it. But for me, I needed a little bit of space because I am in that liminal space right now with my own path. And it's so deeply quiet and uncomfortable right now, but I'm still not doing the deeper work of going in. I still haven't had that courage and I can tune in. It's like sometimes you don't want to hear or you hear it and you don't act. So let's break this out, but also why do we avoid what we know we're supposed to do? Why do we do that?
Everything you're saying is so resonant. And why do we do that? Because it's inconvenient, because it would blow up our life, because it's scary, and because it's a rebirth, but it comes with a little death. And so, understandably, we're hesitant to make those big changes, even when we know we're off our path.
How do we sit with it? So talk to us about, so there's so many women. I just did like a 3 steps, these like 7 steps to, live your most fulfilled life. But it was three offerings. I'll call it an offering on how to move through being stuck because I'm in, like I said, that liminal space. And I shared sort of what I was doing. And I said, you have to go through. You can't go around, up, over, under. I know we want to, but we have to be with it, but it's not easy. So, like, can you give any advice? And is meditation a part of that? Like,
Yeah.
I'd love to hear because what you're doing is courageous. You're really like, you're going, I mean, there's the word witch in the title of your book,
Yeah.
right? That's brave.
Yeah, it's a kamikaze mission.
Yeah, a
It's
little bit. It
yeah.
is.
I think that it's hard. So I think in a way, I'm almost inclined to say you're doing it right. Like your dream life is giving us an indication. You're working overtime in your
Oh,
unconscious there.
but
And
it doesn't make sense. I have no idea why, my friend's son, who she doesn't even have a son, is driving us in a car. Who is this boy driving me in a car? Like this was last night. Like it's so weird. Like I'm sure there's something to it, but I don't decipher it. But maybe
well,
my subconscious has.
it's working through it. And I think one thing that's tricky about all of these realignments back under a path is they don't happen with a time course that we're accustomed to.
Mm,
They gestate for a while. And sometimes, even if you might be ready for the change, like there are circumstances around you that aren't ready. So these things I think are almost always slower than we want them to be.
interesting.
And so, are you actually avoiding it, or is it actually a slow process? I don't know. Um, but I would explore that. And how do we force ourselves to be with it? Um, I think that we need. I always like the word spaciousness because right now we can crowd our conscious bandwidth with scrolling, with work, with socialization. Like there can be no free moments. And so it's little things like doing the dishes without listening to a podcast, like that silence is a time when the brain does its defragging and it closes down tabs. It's any kind of engaging with those sources of beauty or the sublime where we just give it space. Like you're just sitting and listening to a song that you love, or you're just taking a walk in some natural setting, or you're just observing kids being miraculous, something like that. And you're not doing something and that, you're just being with that. And I like tears as a device. I think that a lot gets transmuted when we really let ourselves have a deep, big, ugly cry. And meditation is great. Meditation's great, but like we know that one, and it's hard to do consistently. But sometimes for someone who doesn't want to meditate, I love shaking. I think that putting on shamanic drum music, I love the musician James Asher, and I'll put that on and I will shake for a minute or two. And that seems to excavate what's stuck in my fascia, what's stuck in the unconscious. It brings it up, and then I can be with it. But any intentional ritual, when I'm writing, I have no time. So I light a candle, say a 10-second prayer, and then I'm in it. But that framing is still powerful. And so any intention we can give to, I want to be with this liminal time. I want to be with what needs to bubble up, what I need to claim, where I need to be course correcting. And then you just keep sitting with it. And, I like the way my friend Maury Fontanez describes intuition. She's like, it's neutral. It drops in like a period at the end of the sentence. Like we can be tortured with what's the answer? What's the course correction? What's the path? And if we're still tortured, it's not there yet. And then sometimes it's just like click, and you're like, oh. And it almost feels like it was so obvious, but we can't get there before we're ready.
I think that's beautiful. And that was some of the messaging I was getting. It was sort of like trust the process. There's more to learn, and sort of accepting that. But sometimes we don't want to hear what we're hearing. You know what I mean? So
Yes.
the messages can be coming to you, and then we're just like, yeah, I don't want that message. Give me a different message, right?
I've learned that if we get the message, we don't make things easier by pretending we didn't hear it,
Yes,
even
because
though
then
it
we're going to
seems
get
like.
another lesson, probably something that maybe will smack us in the face that we don't want. So probably not a good idea,
I
right?
think you do the hard thing now to avoid the like slow burn of the wrong path over time.
Um, I really could talk to you all day. I love this conversation so much that, there's the work you're doing is so important and it's interesting and I love where you're taking it. Um, if you want to just take a moment, think about, is there anything I didn't ask you today, though, that you want to offer my audience before we wrap up? Like anything that you feel called to share?
I think that if it feels overwhelming, the idea of what do you put into practice with false anxiety, with true anxiety, if you can start nowhere else it's community actually. It's just making sure that you are prioritizing spending time with the people that fill your cup. And that is often an uphill battle because our lives are not designed for community. We are increasingly isolated. But this is at the heart of genetically, we feel unwell when we don't feel grounded in community, with a sense of belonging. And so we need to fight for that in our modern lives. And that's priority number one.
I love that you ended there because that was a question I wanted to ask you about. And those female friendships or, that sense of belonging is so important. Any advice though, but where to find that community if you're, I don't know, you've moved, you've grown apart from your usual people, whatever it might look like?
Yeah. Yeah, so I think that sometimes it's just a matter of identifying because sometimes we're in the habit of being around the people that push themselves into our schedule or the people that are legacy friendships where we feel a sense of loyalty and obligation. So if you can identify when I'm with this person, I leave feeling really nourished. I leave where my nervous system feels calm or I feel excited. That's the person you want to invest in. And if you don't have any version of that person in your life, and invest in can even be we're leaving voice memos for each other. We're each taking a walk, even though we live halfway around the world, and we're calling each other. But if you don't have people like that in your life, good places to start seeking out friendships like that is anywhere where people are trying to do better. So, volunteering at a pet hospital, 12-step meetings, community meditations, farmers market events, yoga, all of these places where we're just trying to do the work and grow, that's a pretty good filter for people that are going to end up being those kinds of that kind of person that fills your cup.
So beautiful. Thank you. Ladies, access to Ellen's book will be on your podcast player and everything we've talked about in her website. But where on your Instagram, where should I direct them?
Yeah, so on Instagram, I'm at Ellen Vora MD, and I'm pretty active there, though also in that kind of out of the habit and don't want to get back in the habit. And yet I have a lot to say.
Totally, totally.
So it's always a tension in my life. And then my website is ellenvora.com and my books, The Anatomy of Anxiety, and one day eventually The Season of the Witch.
Yes, I can't wait. If you want, come back. I'd love to have you back.
I love it.
Thank you. This has been fantastic. Such a pleasure to be with you. And it's so nice when you feel like the energy of somebody and then they're even more lovely in person. So such a pleasure. I really love this conversation, and I know the audience will as well.
I've loved it as well. I hope it can be helpful. Thank you,
Thank you.
Michelle.
Thank you.